Imagine buying a sandwich and accidentally starting the worst war in human history. That's exactly what happened on June 28, 1914. A teenage assassin named Gavrilo Princip walked into a deli in Sarajevo, convinced he'd failed his mission. He was hungry, frustrated, and ready to go home. Then fate played the cruelest joke in history. The car carrying his target, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, made a wrong turn and stalled directly in front of him, 5 feet away. Princip pulled out his pistol and fired twice. Within 37 days, the entire world was burning. To understand how one assassination triggered global chaos, you need to know that Europe in 1914 was basically a room full of loaded guns. Every major country had made secret promises to protect their friends. Britain promised to defend France. Russia promised to defend Serbia. Germany promised to back up Austria-Hungary. These weren't just friendly handshakes. They were contracts written in blood. If one country got punched, 5 others were legally required to start swinging. Nobody thought this was dangerous. They thought it would prevent war. They were dead wrong. The Balkan region of Europe was a nightmare waiting to happen. This small area in southeastern Europe was home to dozens of different ethnic groups, religions, and languages. The massive Austro-Hungarian Empire controlled much of it, but many people there didn't want to be controlled. Serbians especially hated being ruled by Austria-Hungary. They wanted independence. They wanted their own nation. Secret groups formed, planning rebellions and assassinations. The most dangerous group called themselves the Black Hand. They were willing to die to free their people, and they were about to get their chance. Franz Ferdinand was next in line to rule Austria-Hungary, one of Europe's most powerful empires. But here's the twist: almost nobody actually liked him. His own uncle, the emperor, thought he was too modern and too sympathetic to the empire's minorities. Military leaders didn't trust him. Even his wife Sophie wasn't considered good enough because she wasn't from a royal family. Yet Franz Ferdinand had one dangerous quality. He wanted to reform the empire and give more rights to Slavic people like the Serbians. The Black Hand feared this would make people less angry and kill their independence movement. A kind archduke was more dangerous than a cruel one. Franz Ferdinand's trip to Sarajevo in June 1914 was a security disaster from the start. The date chosen was a Serbian national holiday, a day when anti-Austrian feelings ran hottest. The route was published in newspapers days before. There were only 120 police officers protecting the parade route in a city of 50,000 people. The Archduke rode in an open-top car, moving slowly so crowds could see him. His security chief had warned this was suicide, but Franz Ferdinand ignored him. He believed showing no fear would earn respect. Instead, it made him the easiest target in Europe. The Black Hand sent 6 young assassins to kill Franz Ferdinand. Most were teenagers. All were willing to die. They positioned themselves along the parade route, each armed with bombs and pistols. They also carried cyanide pills to swallow after the attack so they couldn't be tortured for information. These weren't hardened criminals. They were kids who'd been convinced that murder was heroic. The first assassin in line, Muhammad Mehmed Bashik, completely froze when the cars approached. He later said a policeman was standing too close and he panicked. The Archduke's car rolled right past him. The second assassin, Nedeljko Chabranovic, had more courage. As the Archduke's car approached, he pulled out a hand grenade, smacked it against a pole to activate the timer, and hurled it at the vehicle. For 1 second, it looked like the mission would succeed. Then the Archduke's driver saw the bomb flying through the air and hit the accelerator. The bomb bounced off the folded roof of the car and exploded under the vehicle behind them. Shrapnel wounded about 20 people. Chabranovic swallowed his cyanide pill and jumped into a river to drown. But the cyanide was old and weak. It just made him vomit. Police pulled him out and arrested him. After the explosion, chaos erupted. The Archduke's driver sped away toward the town hall. Franz Ferdinand was furious but unharmed. When he arrived, he interrupted the mayor's prepared speech with an angry shout. "Mr. Mayor, one comes here for a visit and is received by bombs. It is outrageous." But after a few minutes, he calmed down. Officials assured him the danger was over. They'd caught one assassin. The others had surely fled. Franz Ferdinand decided to continue his visit but changed the plan. Instead of touring the city, he would visit the people wounded in the bombing. It was a kind gesture. It was also a fatal mistake. The 4 remaining assassins scattered after hearing the explosion. They assumed the mission had succeeded or failed completely. Either way, their job was done. Gavrilo Princip, just 19 years old, walked away from his position feeling defeated. He'd been ready to throw his life away for Serbian freedom, and now he had nothing to show for it. He was hungry. He was depressed. So he did what any teenager would do. He went to get food. He walked into Moritz Schiller's delicatessen on Franz Joseph Street and ordered a sandwich. History doesn't record what kind. While he ate, he had no idea that fate was bringing his target directly to him. The Archduke's new plan was simple: drive straight along the Appel Quay to the hospital where bombing victims were being treated. No stops, no detours, maximum speed. But there was a problem. Nobody told the drivers about the route change. As the motorcade left the town hall, the first car turned right onto Franz Joseph Street, following the original route. The Archduke's driver, Leopold Lodjka, simply followed. When the governor sitting in the car realized the mistake, he shouted for Lodjka to stop and back up. The car's transmission was terrible. The engine stalled. The car sat motionless in the middle of the street. Gavrilo Princip stepped out of the deli, still chewing his sandwich, and couldn't believe his eyes. The Archduke's car was directly in front of him, 5 feet away. The top was down. Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were clearly visible, looking confused as their driver tried to restart the stalled engine. For a brief moment, time seemed frozen. Princip's hand moved to the pistol in his pocket. Nobody in the crowd realized what was about to happen. Later, witnesses said Princip looked pale and shaky. He was terrified, but he'd been taught that fear meant nothing when fighting for freedom. He stepped forward. Princip fired twice at point-blank range. The first bullet hit Franz Ferdinand in the neck, slicing through his jugular vein. The second hit Sophie in the abdomen. She collapsed immediately. Franz Ferdinand, bleeding heavily, begged his wife to stay alive for their children. His last words were, "Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for our children." Both were dead within minutes. Princip tried to shoot himself but was tackled by the crowd before he could pull the trigger. He swallowed his cyanide pill, but like his fellow conspirator, it only made him sick. Police dragged him away as he vomited in the street. The assassination was over in less than 10 seconds. When news of the assassination reached other European capitals, the initial reaction was not much. Political murders happened occasionally. Most governments sent polite condolence letters and assumed life would continue normally. Britain's King George V was more upset about his horse losing a race that day. The stock markets barely moved. Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm II was on his yacht and didn't even cut his vacation short. The general feeling was that Austria-Hungary would punish Serbia somehow, and that would be the end of it. Nobody imagined that in 5 weeks, their entire civilization would be tearing itself apart. The fuse had been lit, but nobody smelled the smoke yet. Austria-Hungary wanted revenge, but they needed an excuse for war that wouldn't look like simple bullying. So they created a list of 10 demands for Serbia, demands so harsh that Serbia couldn't possibly accept them all. Austria demanded the right to send their own police into Serbia to hunt conspirators. They demanded Serbia ban all anti-Austrian groups and propaganda. They demanded Serbian officials who criticized Austria be fired immediately. These demands violated Serbia's independence and sovereignty. Austria knew this. They were counting on Serbia to refuse so they'd have an excuse to invade. It was a trap, and everyone could see it. But the alliance system meant everyone had to pretend these were reasonable requests. On July 25th, Serbia shocked the world by accepting almost all of Austria's demands. They agreed to crack down on revolutionary groups. They'd fire anti-Austrian officials. They'd cooperate with investigations. But they refused one demand: allowing Austrian police to operate on Serbian soil. That would mean they weren't really an independent country anymore. Serbia's response was so reasonable that even Kaiser Wilhelm said Austria no longer had any reason for war. But Austria-Hungary didn't want peace, they wanted war. 3 days later, exactly 1 month after the assassination, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The dominoes began to fall. Russia faced an impossible decision. They'd promised to protect Serbia if Austria attacked, but Russia wasn't ready for war. Their army was still recovering from a humiliating defeat against Japan in 1905. Their economy was weak. The Tsar's own advisors told him to stay out of it, but Russia couldn't look weak in front of the other European powers. On July 30th, Tsar Nicholas II ordered his army to mobilize, to prepare for war. This wasn't an attack, just preparation. But in 1914, mobilization meant war was inevitable. Gathering millions of soldiers and moving them to borders was like pointing a loaded gun. Once you started, you couldn't stop without looking like a coward. Germany had always feared being crushed between Russia and France. Now it was happening. When Russia mobilized, Germany demanded they stop within 12 hours. Russia refused. On August 1st, Germany declared war on Russia. But Germany's war plan, called the Schlieffen Plan, required them to knock out France first before Russia's slow-moving army could fully mobilize. So on August 3rd, Germany declared war on France too, even though France hadn't done anything yet. The plan required German troops to sweep through Belgium to attack France from an unexpected direction. There was just one problem. Belgium was neutral, and Britain had promised to protect neutral countries. Britain didn't want war. Their economy was booming. They ruled a quarter of the world and had no desire to mess it up with a European conflict. But when German troops marched into Belgium on August 4th, Britain had to choose: honor their promise to protect Belgium or look like cowards who broke their word. Britain sent Germany an ultimatum: withdraw from Belgium by midnight or face war. Germany's chancellor called Britain's treaty with Belgium just a scrap of paper and refused. At 11:00 p.m. London time, the ultimatum expired. Britain declared war on Germany. The British Foreign Secretary famously said, "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime." Let's recap the timeline because the speed is terrifying. June 28th, assassination. July 28th, Austria declares war on Serbia. July 30th, Russia mobilizes. August 1st, Germany declares war on Russia. August 3rd, Germany declares war on France and invades Belgium. August 4th, Britain declares war on Germany. In just 37 days, a sandwich shop encounter turned into global war. Millions of men who'd been living normal lives, working farms, running shops, attending school, were suddenly marching toward the most horrific battlefield conditions in human history. And almost none of them understood why. When asked, most soldiers said they were fighting because their country needed them. Few could explain what the war was actually about. When war was declared, crowds in every capital celebrated like their team had won a championship. Young men rushed to enlist, afraid the war would end before they got their chance at glory. Military recruiters were overwhelmed. In Britain, so many men volunteered that the army ran out of uniforms. Families threw parties for sons going off to war. Everyone, from generals to civilians, believed the war would be over in weeks, maybe months. Home by Christmas was the common phrase. They imagined war like the quick conflicts of the 1800s. A few big battles, a clear winner, everyone goes home. Nobody imagined trenches stretching 400 miles. Nobody imagined poison gas or machine guns mowing down thousands in minutes. They were marching toward hell with flowers in their rifles. By December 1914, the Christmas everyone expected to celebrate at home came and went with soldiers freezing in muddy trenches. The war had stalled into a nightmarish stalemate. Neither side could advance. Attacking across open ground meant certain death from machine guns. So both sides dug trenches and settled in for what would become 4 years of grinding horror. Soldiers lived in mud with rats and disease. They watched friends die for tiny strips of land that would be lost the next day. Poison gas drifted across battlefields, melting men's lungs. By 1918, empires had collapsed, 20 million people were dead, and another 21 million were wounded, and it all traced back to one teenager and a sandwich. Gavrilo Princip never lived to see the world he'd destroyed. Because he was under 20 years old at the time of the assassination, he couldn't be executed under Austrian law. Instead, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was locked in a tiny cell at Terezin Fortress, chained to a wall in conditions designed to break him. He developed tuberculosis. His arm had to be amputated due to infected wounds from his suicide attempt. By 1918, he weighed just 88 pounds. On April 28, 1918, just 6 months before the war ended, Princip died in his cell at age 23. His last words reportedly were, "My body is being consumed by prison, but my soul is free." Some saw him as a freedom fighter. Others saw him as the man who killed millions. The Black Hand organization that planned the assassination didn't survive the war either. Their leader, Dragutin Dimitrijevic, codenamed Apis, was actually arrested by the Serbian government in 1917. Serbia's leaders realized the Black Hand had become too powerful and dangerous. Apis was tried for treason and executed by firing squad. Most of the other conspirators involved in Franz Ferdinand's assassination were also imprisoned or executed. The supreme irony. Serbia, the country they'd tried to help by killing the Archduke, was completely destroyed in World War I. Over 25% of Serbia's population died, the highest death rate of any country in the war. The Black Hand had wanted to save Serbia. Instead, they'd nearly destroyed it. Looking back, the war seems preventable at almost every step. If the Archduke's driver had known the route change, there'd be no wrong turn. If security had been better, the assassins would never have gotten close. If Austria had accepted Serbia's reasonable response, there'd be no war declaration. If Germany had told Austria to back down, the crisis would have ended. If Russia hadn't mobilized, Germany wouldn't have felt threatened. If Britain had made its position clearer earlier, Germany might have thought twice. But each country made the choice that seemed safest in the moment. Each thought they were being defensive, not aggressive. That's the real lesson. Sometimes everyone makes reasonable choices that add up to catastrophe. The story of World War I's beginning isn't really about a sandwich or a wrong turn. It's about how quickly peace can collapse when countries tie themselves to automatic promises they can't control. It's about how pride and fear can turn minor incidents into massive tragedies. Most terrifyingly, it's about how nobody, not kings, generals, or politicians, actually wanted the war that happened, yet nobody could stop it once it started. The machines of mobilization and alliance were too powerful. 110 years later, our world is still full of alliances and promises. Countries still make threats they hope they'll never have to follow through on. We still believe that showing strength prevents war. Franz Ferdinand believed that too. He was wrong. Let's hope we're not making the same mistake.